Ray Elliott, the Marketing Manager from Utari. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Is Your Voice Network Full of Beep? This session is led by Chuck French, our Chief Growth Officer from Utari. Good afternoon, Chuck.
Hi, Vicki.
And we have Vicki Sador, our Vice President of Channel Development and Sales from Utari. Good afternoon, Vicki.
Hey, Vicki.
And we also have Rich of Digital Transformation. Good afternoon, Rich.
Good afternoon, Vicki.
Thanks for being here. This session will be recorded and a copy of the recording will be sent to you after today's webinar concludes. You'll also find a couple handouts you can download from the handout section of the menu. One of them includes our infographic of our 5 layers of protection that we'll be talking through today. You can just click on any of those PDFs to download before today's webinar concludes. We'll also pause several times throughout the webinar and answer any questions. Depending on your interface, you might have a little webinar question box or a little chat box. Please just type those in at any time, and so we'll just get started with Chuck.
Thank you again, Vicki, and welcome everyone. Today we're here to answer an important question, and Vicki's already touched upon this, and you can see that question on your screen. So, is there stuff we don't want to travel through your voice network? Just as importantly, we're going to address why we should care about that. And that answer is straightforward. Bad things are happening every day to organizations because of what's traveling through their voice network. They're happening. And it doesn't have to be that way. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to review the problem of unwanted voice traffic, the solution, and then we'll pull both pieces together in a few illustrative case studies. Finally, we're going to show you how you can get analysis of your specific voice traffic. And our promise to all of you is we're going to keep the pace brisk, and we welcome questions, as Vicki just mentioned. So we enjoy them, so please ask them. They really are appreciated. Vicki just introduced us, but here's another look at your presenters. And here are our roles. I'm going to address the problem of unwanted voice traffic. Rich, who also serves as product manager for our voice traffic filter, will show you the solution and provide a demo. And finally, Vicki will review case studies and show you how to engage Utari and our partners to learn more about your specific situation. So a few comments about Utari, which as you can see on the screen, is a Latin word that means to change. We've been building enterprise telecommunications software for many, many years, over 30. We have clients in every vertical, and our reputation's been built on providing unparalleled support and technology that simply just works. Every one of us in the company is really proud, and we really guard that reputation. We're also known for innovation. Despite being around for over years in the enterprise space, we've never lost the edge of acting like a perpetual startup. We have little client, employee, or even partner turnover. Further, all employees at Utari are owners via our employee stock ownership plan. The ESOP helps align us as an organization and has only improved an already great culture. Specifically, we're all aligned around leadership in a new and emerging product category that we've defined as a voice traffic filter. And I'll add one last point. There's an origin story here. Utari has the world's leading business voicemail solution called Utari Voice. It's incredible. Our customers love it. It's the best. But it's our work on Utari Voice that gave Utari the authority to build the Utari Voice Traffic Filter. The authority was provided to us by our customers that said, we know you and trust you to solve the problem of unwanted calls. And we're also extremely proud of that. Okay. Now we're going to transition to the problem we're here to talk about today. As the slide says, the problem is the voice network is open. It's everywhere around us today. Voice remains the avenue that people still use when they need an immediate response. And I'll offer up my personal experience. When I'm upset about something and need immediate resolution, like many people, I pick up the telephone. When I see a bunch of asynchronous communication by email or text or Teams messaging that's ambiguous or confusing, which happens all the time, I pick up the telephone immediately to sort it out. Voice communication remains embedded as an incredibly important medium of communication for business. But as it says on the screen, the voice network is largely viewed as a utility because it's voice. Well, here's the problem with that. Again, the voice network is treated like a utility, not the tool that can provide anyone, including cyber criminals, instant access to your people. I came across a relevant security expert's post last week on LinkedIn that really captures the moment. He stated, and I'll put this in quotes, a CISO of a 120,000 seat company told me yesterday that 50% of the phishing attempts, that's email phishing, but it's anything that are trying to induce someone to do something. So it's phishing, it's email, it's voice. 50% of the phishing attempts against this organization were characterized as vishing attacks or voice phishing attacks. So he says from almost nothing before COVID to 50% of the total volume reported to the Security Operations Center today. That's amazing. It's startling. But why would that be? Well, in the same thread, an unrelated security expert replied, and the reason is simple. Email phishing defense is improving, and threat actors are seeking the non-monitored and non-protected vectors. Well, for most companies, the actual traffic that travels the voice network is completely unguarded, and the bad guys know it. I'm going to share some research to provide context and the proof points around this situation. Some of this research is Mitari, some of it's curated. All the sources are provided on the slide. These statistics are eye-opening, and since the print might be a little tough to read, I'll cover them briefly. All right, first off, well, let's not change that slide. 45% of all robocalls are scams. Fraud through the voice channel cost Americans $3.3 billion annually. 81% of organizations are concerned that the voice channel is a major threat vector. 77% of organizations have faced vishing attacks. And lastly, the vishing or voice phishing success rate is 37%. 37%. Vishing is real, expensive, and successful. This is all known. So here's what's stunning. Companies rely on people, their employees, to stop these attacks. Yet, 95% of cybersecurity breaches are caused by human error. 90% of successful cyber attacks require human interaction. 43% of organizations believe employee error is the greatest source of risk. But only 41% of security awareness training programs even cover vishing, right? Which again is voice phishing. And lastly, 36% of security professionals believe security awareness training is the top way to protect the voice network. Do you see the inconsistency here? And we've come to our conclusion, despite knowing that humans are the weakest link in a security strategy, and organizations know their people are being targeted by the voice network, organizations still think training is the solution to protect people. It's a little mind-boggling. But, and this isn't theoretical. Breaches that start with the voice network happen all the time. You just don't hear about them. The root causes of data breaches aren't often disclosed for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes the victim's embarrassed. Sometimes the cyber insurer prevents it. They don't want to introduce a roadmap for the bad guys. But sometimes we learn what really happened in a breach. So late last year, Robinhood, which is the trading platform, announced that personal information about 7 million of their customers was accessed by a data breach. I'm going to repeat that, 7 million records. This group knows a breach like that turns a company upside down. There's a huge financial hit and a hit to their brand. Nothing good about it. Take a look at Robinhood's stock price. It's in the tank. But there's also a direct monetary cost. Robinhood settled the data breach class action for $20 million for failing to prevent the event. $20 million. And do you know how the bad actors managed to get in? Well, it was reported by Robinhood, an unauthorized third party socially engineered a customer support employee by phone and was able to access its customer support systems. Bad guys just walked right in. The employee wasn't protected, the customer's data wasn't protected, and Robinhood is paying the price. No resistance to the threat vector whatsoever. The front door to the voice network was wide open, and it happens all the time. Another memorable attack was on Twitter in July of 2020. 130 high-profile Twitter accounts were compromised. People like Joe Biden and Elon Musk and Barack Obama and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett, they're all taken over, and the bad guys use the phone to access. All right, so at this point, I really hope you're convinced that the voice network represents a potential threat to your organization. because I'm beating on it. But all right, what are the tactics used by these bad actors? Well, I'll briefly cover them really quickly. First, robocalls. Everybody knows what they are, and we kind of universally hate them. But they don't have to be bad, right? For example, a prescription reminder from the pharmacy has a useful purpose, but your organization might not want those types of calls in their organization. So by the way, this is one of the many reasons why telephone carriers can't solve the problem of unwanted calls. Every organization needs the power to determine what's wanted and unwanted. So just park that and remember that. Spoof calls, those are those fraudulent caller IDs with familiar names and area codes. Again, we've all got them. These calls often come in batches. We call them spoof storms. Vishing, voice phishing attacks, we've already talked about them. Direct nefarious calls, targeted form of vishing attack. That's where bad actors, as a tactic, might attack the C-suite or individuals in the accounts payable area in an organization. They're not broad-based attacks. These are also can be considered socially engineered attacks, which is exactly what happened to Robinhood. Smishing might be a new term for this group. Smishing is SMS phishing. Those are those fraudulent text messages that look like they come from reputable companies. As a reminder, if you aren't sure of the sender, please don't click anything for everybody here. And so again, these are tactics, and more are being developed daily because the bad actors are pretty smart. So ping me if you want to learn more about some of these newer, emerging threats like QR code phishing. Just be very careful. So as I mentioned a moment ago, every organization will have a different definition of unwanted calls based on their specific business. One size doesn't fit all. It's going to vary, and you as the end user want the controls. Still, we can generally categorize unwanted calls as nuisance calls and nefarious calls. So at Mitari, we use nuisance traffic and nuisance calls as terms that talk about barriers to optimal people performance. These are the calls that reduce productivity. We use the terms nefarious traffic and nefarious calls to talk about threats which could include cybersecurity risks related to ransomware attacks, data breaches, social engineering, data IP theft, identity theft. Again, Robinhood was socially engineered by a nefarious call. All right. So all of us want to solve for the productivity sapping nuisance calls. They cost the organization money. We also want to solve for the nefarious traffic. They're even more dangerous. So before I turn over to Rich to review Mitari's voice traffic filter, which is the industry's leading and award-winning solution to nuisance and nefarious calls, I'm going to pause it here for questions. Vicki?
Thanks, Chuck. No, we don't have any questions at this time.
Perfect. Rich, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, you have to advance the slide. There we go. So really quickly, our voice traffic filter has 5 layers of protection. I'm going to walk you through the layers really quickly. Then I'm going to show you the layers on our demo system here in Chicago and answer any questions that you might have. So while these things are numbered, I want to point out that this is not necessarily the order of operation. The 5 layers work together, and within 100 milliseconds, we'll use all 5 of these layers to make a decision whether we're going to go ahead and pass the call through to the called party, whether we're going to drop the call, or whether we're going to divert it someplace else. And these tools all work together. So the first tool that I'm showing here is Stir Shaken. This is a signature-based way of carriers being able to say that a call coming into your network, that caller ID, is authorized by the calling party. That's all it is. It doesn't tell you whether you want the call, whether you don't want the call. Its purpose is to say, is this spoofed or not? That's it. Next, and this is where a lot of our proprietary IP comes in, and IP from many of our partners, we have a proprietary dynamic database. And this consists of over 10 million telephone numbers that are known to be bad actors or robocalls or unwanted calls. And we have numerous suppliers that help us with this. We also collect our own telemetry data from our customers. So this information is crowdsourced. It's verified through things like CAPTCHAs, as well as honeypots, et cetera. So the telephone numbers that are in there are, for the most part, it's about 98, 99% effective. We've got about a 1% false positive rate. So to stop false positives. You'd never want to block a call that's a good call. If you look at the bottom, we've got a voice CAPTCHA. So we can send a call that we suspect is spam to the CAPTCHA, and the CAPTCHA will do a reverse Turing test to ensure it's not a robocall. We have our threat radar. This threat radar is an amazing technical control. What it will do, what this layer does is this takes a look at the call volumes that are coming in. It uses machine learning to take a look at an organization's characteristics and says, this is an unusual call pattern. We need to stop this call. And we can catch spam storms, spoof attacks, all sorts of unusual call traffic that pops up. And when I show you the system, you'll see that this particular control in our system is one of the most used in terms of blocking calls. And then it's really important that the enterprise is in control of their destiny. We've been doing this, as Chuck mentioned, for 30 years. Our customers read like a who's who of the Fortune 1000 and government, education, medical. We have about 20% of our customers are in healthcare. They have to have control over their system. So when we designed this, we approached it with a do no harm approach to ensure that the enterprise is in control. They decide what is bad traffic and what is good traffic. We give them the tools so that they can do that and easily administer it. And it's highly effective. We'll get rid of well over 98% of your spam and those calls that you don't want. Some bad calls will get through, like any firewall. This is not 100% effective, but it gets you enough so that you're reducing the bad guys and those calls from them from getting to your people. And that's what you want to do with the technical control. At this point, Chuck, if you could make me presenter, I'm going to show folks this, and we're going to show two screens. Okay, so right now you should be seeing a live screenshot of the system. As I mentioned, this is our demonstration system that we use here in Chicago. Well, we do have some production users on here, so we actually have real traffic. And what I've done is I've just picked year to date what we've seen. And here in the center where you see these 2,000 unwanted calls, you can see that 6% of the calls were blocked by custom rules. Remember, we let the enterprise stay in control. So the administrator can create these rules. We also have the ability for, if the administrator enables certain employees, they can have their own personal block list. So that would come in under the custom rules. I mentioned the proprietary dynamic database. You can see that a quarter of all calls are being blocked by that reputation database. So this is really important because it's 25% of the junk coming into your network. Now, our threat radar, and this is where the machine learning comes in, and this is so essential for success for any organization or for any voice traffic filter, almost 70% of the calls coming into the network are blocked by threat radar. These are those spam storms. You probably all experienced them. Well, back when you were in the office, you all experienced them. Someone's phone rang in a cubicle, and then the next phone rang, and the next phone rang. And what's happening there is the bad actor is using an auto dialer or a predictive dialer to call all of your telephone numbers in sequence. That's what they're doing. And it just so happens today was your turn, and your organization is now hit by a spam storm. And that's what's representative by these purple lines up here. These are all spam storms that were stopped by our threat radar. And what we do, because we just like to do no harm, when the spam storm starts, we'll use that technical control, the CAPTCHA, to go ahead and screen out the robocalls. So we'll send the calls to the CAPTCHA. The CAPTCHA is going to challenge the caller. It's a reverse Turing test. So it's going to answer and say, hey, thanks for calling Utari. For your security, press 231 now. And it randomizes it up. So the bots get filtered out, the humans are allowed through, and you stop the robocalls dead in their tracks. And the reason why we employed a CAPTCHA is, once again, do no harm. You want to make sure that you're not blocking a legitimate caller. I'd rather the call go through, a spam call come in, or even even any unwanted call come in, then block a legitimate caller. Think of a hospital, you would never want to block a patient or a referral from another healthcare provider or an insurance company. So you want to make sure those calls absolutely get through. And you can see here that the database is highly effective. 93%, so this is with all of the protections here, 93% are robocalls, and only 6% are legitimate callers coming in. So the CAPTCHA is very, very important. And then I've got my threat radar statistics down here. As an administrator, the whole job here is to make this easy. So once the system is set up, you spend about 2 weeks tuning it, and then it runs on autopilot. And then monthly, take a look at it. You come right here to this dashboard. If you're really wise, take a snapshot of it, send it to your boss, get some kudos there. And you can see here the top unwanted callers, the top wanted callers, and I can drill down into these. I have the ability to get all of the data from the system, and I can export that as a CSV file, take it offline and analyze it. I can look at it online, but here you see all the junk calls that have come in and the number of calls during the time period selected, and then the top wanted calls, because you want to look at both of these things, because something that's coming in that's wanted may not be wanted and may need a rule set aside around it. So now I'm going to go ahead and just show you one more screen. I'm going to go to the Rules Manager. Remember, the 3 things that I wanted you to take away here are that this is easy to administer, do no harm, and that it's highly effective. So this puts the administrator in control where they can go ahead and create their own rules that apply to their organization. Let me give you a common one. In healthcare, they still use these things called faxes. I don't know why, but they use them. And as I mentioned, 1/5 of our customer base is in healthcare. So the proprietary database shows most fax service telephone numbers as junk. And the reason why that is many of the reputation databases were designed to stop calls to cell phones. Okay, a cell phone can't accept a fax. So if a fax service is calling your cell phone, it's junk, right? But the consumer is very different from the enterprise. So in the enterprise world, you need those calls to come through. Now, I would not want a fax call to come through to my endpoint at work, but I do want it to come through to the fax endpoint. So I can go ahead and create an allow list of all my fax endpoints and just say allow all calls. So now the fax issue is resolved. Fax calls won't come to my end users endpoints, they'll go to the fax endpoints. That's just one use case. We've got hundreds of them, and we know this so that when our operations team is setting up the system, we already have right out of the box rules that we recommend to our enterprise customers to go ahead and create. As an administrator, I can filter, create rules against outbound calls. So I can stop people from calling premium numbers or country codes that we don't do business in. So I can really very quickly create a rule. I'm not going to do it right now in the interest of time, but this is one click, create the rule, and it's one of those 3 actions that I mentioned, pass it through, send it to CAPTCHA, or drop it. And we do that very quickly. I didn't give you the speeds of this, but we do make a decision with all 5 of those layers in 100 milliseconds, and this was built to be carrier grade. We literally can do with just one installation 150 calls per second, and we can scale that up to as large as we need to. All right, that's the system. I'm going to ask if there are any questions. Victoria?
Yes, thank you, Rich. We actually have a bunch of questions that have been coming in. So the first one that we have is that we're moving from on-prem to a cloud phone system. Do you have plans to integrate with ACO, Zoom, or Cisco WebEx calling?
The answer is yes, and we're under NDA, so I can't tell you which players we're currently working with, but we're really the only game in town. So many of the cloud providers are moving to us. We also have on our roadmap the ability for later on this year for those cloud providers to access all of this through APIs. So that's very important to understand. Today, we're using everything using the SIP invitation. In the future, we'll still have that ability, but we'll also have the ability for anyone to write to this interface and call an API, and that will work with your cloud vendors as well.
Thank you. Another one for you, Rich. Is the recording for capture customized for every customer, as in you've reached ABC company or XYZ company?
Yes, when we set up the CAPTCHA, we work with the end user so that it is not jarring. You want a caller to understand who they've reached, so it sounds to them just like they've reached an auto attendant or an IVR, and it's customized.
Rich, can you also block a caller by name? Can you talk more about the blocking process?
Absolutely. We can block by name, we can block by number, we can block by the stir shaken attestation score. A lot of our customers will, for example, block calls that are marked anonymous, or some will block calls that say spam call. You'll see that sometimes across your cell phone. If the whatever the CNAM is, you can create rules around
that. Will this show the numbers in our organization that are being targeted by spam?
Absolutely. We collect all the information in that SIP invitation is captured by the system. So you see the caller ID of the calling party and the called party ID. And as I mentioned, that information can be extracted from the system. And so you can go ahead and see which telephone numbers in your organization are being attacked the most and who's attacking them, which is really important. And that again comes down to that bullet point of the easy administration. You want to be able to do this stuff quickly. You don't want your full-time job to be blocking unwanted calls.
Thanks, Rich. We have another question that came in asking about our dynamic database. Can you kind of speak to our database and the maturity of it and just kind of our collection of it?
Sure. Our proprietary dynamic database has 7 different suppliers. So we have 5 reputation companies that we work with, the top 5 in the world. We also have 2 databases of do not originate phone numbers. These are toll-free numbers and local numbers that have registered, and they do not make outbound calls. They only take inbound. So when we see a caller ID that matches the do not originate list, we know it's spam, we know it's unwanted. You can just go ahead and drop that. On the reputation databases, and I mentioned there's 5 suppliers for that, some of those are going to be false positives, and that's where our other controls come into place. The databases are very, very good, but remember, most of them were designed for consumers, and the enterprise has very different needs than the consumer does. So that's why you need all 5 layers of protection.
Great, thank you. And sorry, I know we have a lot of questions popping in, so we'll just speak to one more, maybe we'll move on and get to some of these in a little bit, since I know
this is not supposed to be the Rich show. We've got other content.
So once a call has passed as a legitimate caller, is that something you can also monitor as well?
Once the call is passed, we're done. We step out of we're really out of the call path, if you will. Our job is to do this before the phone rings. Once we've made our decision, it's done. And this is really important, and I want everybody to understand this from a security perspective, because oftentimes the people that we're working with are on the security team. We're not listening into your calls. Your calls are your business. You don't want a third party monitoring your telephone calls to your enterprise. Could you imagine if you were a public company and you were for sale, or you're looking to do a merger or acquisition, and people are listening in to the CEO's calls? You can't have that in the enterprise.
Well, thank you, Rich. We have some more questions, but we'll hold some of those until we kind of
Let's
continue.
give Vicki a chance to talk.
Thank you so much, Rich. Yeah, we'll turn it over to Vicki Sidor now.
I get the fun stuff. So I have a great seat where I am in my role, being on the sales side of the house, that I get to actually see what happens out in the real world after we go forward. So it's a lot of fun for me. What you see on the screen here is what we call our index of unwanted voice traffic. And a lot of you guys on the line, or even our partners, may be kind of curious as to what your situation might look like or your client situation. So we have been able to analyze millions upon millions of calls, and that puts us in a really unique place because we have a certain amount of expertise of what we see. So on the screen, you see the different primary industries out there. And this shows kind of how often how much of their voice traffic tends to be of the unwanted variety. Now, this unwanted variety is really kind of the known unwanted, not necessarily based on custom rules, but how interesting is this? Knowing that about 45% of this is considered nefarious, right? That's dangerous traffic. And then, of course, we've got the productivity issues associated. But you think about higher education, 15% of all of the calls coming in on average are considered unwanted. But then you might see something smaller, like the 3% in retail. It's interesting because what we've realized is these percentages just don't necessarily tell the whole story. So some of these large organizations, say retail, if, as Chuck says, when he wants instant answers, he's calling, right? They have an inordinate amount of voice traffic. So 3% to one organization may still represent millions upon millions of unwanted voice calls that are still getting into that organization. And so this tells part of the story, but not all of the story. Additionally, this is a rolling average. So every day we're bringing in more data and we're updating this. So for example, just in the last 2 weeks, we worked with a major technology company, one of the largest aggregators and sales companies, and they had 23% of all of their voice traffic coming in was actually considered unwanted, which is a little bit jarring for them as well. So the key takeaway here is everybody's seeing it in every industry. Nobody's really immune. So you guys as clients and our partners might be trying to think, okay, now we know we're probably seeing some of this, but how do we really know what's going on in our individual business? So I wanted to give you guys, and you're going to get more at the end of this, something called a voice traffic assessment. We have 2 ways that we can analyze any organization's voice traffic, and we use that proprietary dynamic database in the first one, which is our voice traffic analysis. This is a free assessment. We take in CDR data. We like to have 30 days to maybe 6 months or even up to a year of data, because then we can really paint an effective picture. But then we turn that data around in about a week and we provide a full assessment of exactly what we're seeing. Again, no charge, no responsibility there, but it's a really good way to pull back the curtain and see kind of what's going on from a perspective that you may not have any idea about. The second assessment that we utilize is something called a proof of concept. And we can start with the analysis and then go to the proof of concept, or many people just start right away with the proof of concept because they want to implement all the 5 layers and see what's really going on. And in this case, we would implement the solution, run it for about 30 days. We can start by just providing data, and then we can end it at that 30-day mark at really turning things on and customizing the solution to see how it impacts the business. So both of these are available to anybody, whether it's through a partner or to the client, and I'll give you more information in a minute on that. So we have a couple of stories here, and I think this is really important because we know what unwanted traffic tends to look like. We know what these definitions tend to be, and now we know how we solve it. But what we may not realize is, what does that mean to an end user? What does that mean to a large organization? So I've got an enterprise here. It's a pharmaceutical business, one of the largest in the world. And it was an interesting story. And when I looked at the attendees that we have on the phone today, some of you guys are really, this is going to hit home for a couple of reasons. For this organization, they were migrating all of their voice lines into their Teams environment. But this same thing we're seeing no matter what that collab system is. We're not trying to pick on any one or the other. But it presented an interesting scenario that they didn't really see coming. Because again, we're all doing this hybrid work thing, work from home. Once those voice lines were put into the Teams environment, the calls started coming in at an inordinate rate. Almost chaos was really ensuing, is kind of what they call it. That was their word. So what I mean by that is a significant portion, and in this case, over 13% of all of the calls were coming in as unwanted, but now they're not just ringing the phone on the desk, they're ringing Teams on their cell phone, They're ringing teams on their iPad, their laptops, and sometimes in their homes. So they literally halted the entire project, put it on hold and said, wait, we got to stop this. So we were able to come in and we're really excited about this because we kind of think we saved the day. But we implemented the voice traffic filter for them. They immediately cut down that 13% of their calls plus some, right? Because then they were able to actually do some customization. They then started back with their migration with their Teams project, and it was a full success. And they saw over 200% ROI, and they equated that in their case because it was a productivity issue. So they were very clear about how they measured their full savings and ROI on this project. So that was a really interesting one because, again, we keep talking about this work from home dynamic, and people say, well, you know, it doesn't really impact this particular issue, but this is a good illustration that it does. The next scenario, it's a financial services firm, one of the largest, again, in the world. We're very lucky to work with these very large financial companies and others. And for this one, it was an interesting one because this is more of a security play. And you may recall that the average investor out there, maybe the good guys versus the bad guy mentality when it came to investing in financial services. This particular group was getting a lot of spam social engineering attempts because they were really targeting the employees of this particular firm, and it took on kind of a life of its own, a little bit dangerous in nature, and they wanted to really do something quickly to stop that. For these guys, it was harassing, it was slowing them down, but again, it was a security risk as well. Same thing, we deployed the voice traffic filter, and for them, immediately 12% of those kind of dangerous bad actor calls were actually reduced, and they got to do some of their custom work as well, so it was a little bit more. And again, for them, it was very much a productivity play on top of the security, and they had over 500% ROI, saving just around $200,000. So enough about us and our story. I want to make sure you kind of know what to do now. And so I'm going to leave this on the screen as we kind of close out. There's a couple of things for you to take away. If you're a partner or a client, you can directly submit CDR to test the extent of the issue within the organization. That first link, and we'll make sure we get this out to you in our follow-up, that first link, you just click right in, upload the CDR, you can do it securely, we'll run it and send you back the report. If by some chance you just want to connect with us, we have two things here. If you just want to talk to your account manager, send it to info@mutare.com. And if you're a partner, which we know there are a lot of partners on here, our friend Ken Roscoe, he's ready and willing, and he can help kind of get you in the right place and educate you up with the tools that you guys need. So with that, I know we still have a lot of questions. I'm going to let Vicki Elliott kind of take us from there.
Great, thank you. Yep, we still have some questions and some new ones that have popped in. So Rich, there's been some questions coming in about our connectivity. Can you talk about how it's integrated, such as utilizing SIP?
Yes, this is a SIP solution. The technology is based on the SIP invitation. We're not answering the call. RTP is not connected. So in that 100 milliseconds where we're making that decision, it's all done through the SIP invitation. We have a proxy server that handles that, and then we use APIs with our other technical controls. It's a 3-server implementation. So it does require SIP. In the future, it's likely still going to require SIP, but you'll be able to access the APIs directly.
Great, thank you. And can you talk a little bit more about spoofed numbers and how the spam calls kind of address this?
That's kind of a broad question. You should never throw those at me because it could take way too much time. Really, you stepped into it. Anyway, anybody can spoof a call. You can literally download an app to your iPhone or to your computer, as long as you've got VoIP, and you can go ahead and spoof that telephone number. There are legitimate reasons to spoof phone calls. My doctor, for example, might want to call me on his cell phone and doesn't want me to get their cell phone, because can you imagine if you're a physician and all of your patients know your cell phone? You'll never sleep. So they spoof the telephone number of the healthcare system they work for. Very legitimate to go ahead and do that. contact centers do it all the time. We do it here at Mutari. We'll put our main telephone number out there instead of necessarily the DID number. So there are legitimate reasons to go ahead and do that. Now, there are illegitimate reasons to go ahead and do that. That's what happened to Robinhood. They had the bad actor spoof their own phone number. So when that unprepared employee answered the call and the person was spoofing a IT person, it was the old IT help desk kind of thing. He thought he was talking to another Robinhood employee. Why not? It says so on the telephone. Okay. And when they asked for the credentials, which by the way, never give up your credentials to anybody, including IT, he gave up his credentials, and $20 million in losses later, half their market cap gone. That was a fatal mistake. So in our system, all you do is you blacklist all your own DIDs. There's no reason for me to call the cubicle next to me, dialing out and hairpin to come back in. The PBX will handle that. If I dial the 10-digit number, it'll see, wait a minute, this is part of my internal dialing plan, keep it in the network. So station-to-station calls aren't impacted by this, but that one rule would have stopped that entire Robinhood breach right there. And we've got other things that would have helped stop it too. So that's the issue with spoof calls. Did I overkill? Answer it?
That's great, thank you. And Vicki, this question is for you, asking about pricing. Can you tell us a little how this is priced?
That's interesting. So we do have a user-based pricing model per user per year, but what most of our organizations do is allow us to do that assessment. Once we monitor the traffic and kind of see what that volume looks like, then we actually provide an enterprise pricing, which gives kind of an all-you-can-eat model. That way people don't have to nickel and dime every time a user gets on or off the solution. So it's much simpler that way, and then we actually can provide the volume and the pricing and really make it make more sense for them.
Great, thank you. And Rich, we have another one for you talking about the CAPTCHA. And if people are coming and hitting the CAPTCHA, are they likely to hang up since it looks like we are interrogating? Do you have any sort of information on how this is working?
All of the research that we've done, and remember, we've gone back to our customers and looked at this, it's the exact same hang up rate that you would get for any IVR or auto attendant that you have in the organization. Usually people are calling for a reason, so they're just punching in the numbers. They have no idea it's a CAPTCHA that they're talking to.
Well, I don't see any more questions coming in right now. We have another one that just popped in, so thank you. Is there a good sized organization this would be suited for? And Vicki, I think this is a good question for you.
Yeah, it's really funny. What we're finding that no, it can be any size organization. The smaller ones, when the unwanted voice traffic gets out of control, can be completely debilitating for a smaller organization. But when these largest enterprises impacted, wow, the dollars are just astounding for them. So no, size does not matter at all.
And Rich, continuing on to the previous CAPTCHA question, once somebody has been validated, do we then store this somewhere for a while so that they can still then bypass the CAPTCHA?
We store, first of all, we store all of the information. Today, we're not creating automatic rules based on telephone numbers passing the CAPTCHA or failing the CAPTCHA. However, I do have that on the roadmap so that if you see a number that's consistently hitting and going to CAPTCHA and passes 100% of the time, there's no reason to keep challenging them. So yes, that is a future feature. Today, what you would do as the admin, remember, we've got that entire call history, and we capture what has happened with the CAPTCHA. You can create a manual rule to always put them on what we call an allow list, and then they'll never have to hit the CAPTCHA again.
Good question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. It looks like we did officially cover all the questions. But if anything comes up later that we didn't cover or you forgot to ask, you can reach out to any one of us or at info@mitari.com. You can find that on our website as well. And a copy of today's session will be sent to you after our webinar concludes, so that'll go out tomorrow. You can watch this again. We will reach out to those of you that have also asked for a copy of today's slide deck. If you also should take 1 minute to take a quick survey on our webinar today on how we did, we really appreciate it. And just thank you again for your time and your participation today. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.